Some might consider mouse pads to be the least exciting part of a desk setup, but if you play competitive FPS games, I'd put it right up there with your choice of mouse or even monitor. Different surfaces can completely change how your cursor input feels, and today you have more choices than you could possibly imagine. So about a year ago, I actually switched from your traditional cloth pad like this to a glass mouse pad like this, and it was for two main reasons. Firstly, it was consistency. While the friction of a cloth pad can change dramatically just from temperature and humidity and how much pressure you're applying to it, a glass pad will always be perfectly consistent no matter how long you've been playing or how stressful the scenario gets. And secondly is speed. I've tried some of the fastest cloth pads on the market, but none of them come even close to some of the glass pads that I've tried. So if you play tracking heavy games like myself, it is an unbelievably fun and really responsive feeling input. And this is the one that I've been using for the past 6 months. It is the Wallhack SP-004, also known as the Skypad 4.0. But yeah, I've been using this thing for about 6 months or so. That video I did about a year ago looking to switch to glass mouse pads, that was not clickbait. Like, I really wanted to switch to a glass pad, and I've been actually using them ever since. I've had a couple more come in actually since maining this thing, and they have just not come close. So yeah, this thing is kind of special and at least worth doing a quick video on. The other day, I actually switched back to a cloth mouse pad just to kind of see what I was missing out on. You know, I've been playing on a glass pad for so long, and it legitimately felt like I was playing with input lag, like especially the direction changes of my mouse. It did not feel great at all. And you know, I've got some of the best cloth pads out there, like the Artisan Raiden, which feels great for a cloth pad. It still does not come close to the glass pad experience for me in terms of responsiveness and like getting close to that raw input of your own hand. The Skypad 4 comes packaged extremely well too. It's 430 by 490 millimeters, which I find big enough, and has a super grippy base, which I've never had slip. I can also appreciate the very clean aesthetic too. No colors, just some very minimal branding. That's the other really cool thing about glass mouse pads. 6 months later, this thing looks legitimately brand new, and I've never cleaned it. Unlike cloth pads, which can wear down, fray, absorb sweat, and eventually need to be cleaned or replaced. Now, some of you are probably thinking, like, you know, why does this guy care so much about a mouse pad? When you combine a low friction pad like this with an ultra lightweight mouse and you just remove all of that friction and inertia from your input, it makes going back to anything else just feel almost impossible. So Skypad 4, what makes this thing so good? Why is it better than the Skypad 3 and the Pulsar Superglide that I was using before it? Well, three main things come to mind. Firstly is the speed. This thing is brutally quick. It is so fast. I think the Skypad 3 would be next in line. This thing feels at least 15%, 20% faster than that. So if you want the lowest friction, most responsive feeling input, which is personally what I want out of a glass mousepad, then there is honestly nothing better. I think the best way to explain what it's like to play on this thing is it's almost like your mouse is hovering on the pad, which sounds surreal, but even on some other glass mouse pads that I've tried, especially the Superglide series, there is a little bit of static friction and grab on the skates, especially when you're like changing directions or like really pressing into the pad. Here, there is none of it. It is an extremely fluid experience. Secondly is the smoothness. Most of the glass pads that I've tried have a hard micro-texture grain to them, and you can feel that during the glide. They almost feel a little bit icy. This also has a micro-texture, so your mouse sensor has something to read, but you can't feel it like at all. So the result is this surreal, almost milky feel to it. This is one of the biggest reasons that I've been using this actually over other competitors. It is an extremely smooth pad. And thirdly, it is by far the quietest glass pad that I've tested. It has none of that scratchy sound which you do get from other glass pads. So yeah, daily driving this thing, even during the day, editing and stuff like that, it has been a really nice experience. Now, some of you might have noticed the sleeve, which is pretty much the biggest downside, I think, of using a glass mouse pad. You pretty much have to wear one of these if you're in a semi-warm climate, because otherwise your hand and your arm will just really get jammed up and stick to the pad, which is not a nice experience at all. At this point though, I mean, this thing is like almost part of my anatomy. I use this thing so much, it's almost a joke. It takes like 5 seconds to put on. I know it looks like super geeky, super like try-hardy, but at the end of the day, it is an objectively better aiming experience. It is just way more consistent not having your arm getting stuck to the pad. And that goes for cloth pads as well. I would actually say even if I went back to playing on a cloth pad, I would probably still use an arm sleeve because nothing can beat that consistent glide of your arm that you get with one of these. The only other downside that I've noticed switching to glass mouse pads are the skates. These glass pads absolutely chew through mouse skates, which makes sense, right? It's a more abrasive, harder surface. Regular PTFE skates, don't even bother. Those things last like 2 weeks on these pads, and that's the main reason that I've switched to using these X-ray pad Obsidians, which are these red ones. They last a lot longer. I have noticed the smoother surface of the Skypad 4 has helped with this a lot too. The skates just seem to last a little bit longer, whereas pads with more grain and more texture just eat through them a bit quicker. Also, a quick mention of the Superglide V2. This one did just come out. It is an extremely thin glass pad, which I actually like. I think people should be trying to make these glass pads as thin as they possibly can. But this is more of a control-focused surface. It's like a higher friction experience, which is not something that I think makes sense at all for a glass mouse pad, because just the way that that friction feels, it's very bitey, very grabby, and it's not like a cloth pad where the friction curve feels really natural. So if you're after a control pad experience, I just think you should stick to a cloth pad. The Skypad 4 on the other hand, I mean, I've had a lot of really fun games on this thing, and I think it's going to be like my i300 IEMs, something that is just so good that I never end up upgrading it. It is kind of pricey for a mousepad though, $120, which makes it one of the most expensive mousepads on the market by far. But for something that never needs replacing, never needs cleaning, is virtually going to stay in this condition forever, and is the best mousepad on the market in my opinion, I think that price is easily justified.